I'd be very curious to know if this is a trend across that you've noticed as well. And maybe some of the people that are listening that might not realize their introvertedness is a superpower, there must be some key decisions you've made to kind of shift that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, actually, funnily enough, Ryan Dice was on my podcast. I have a podcast called The Introvert's Edge as well, and it's only because I got tired of people talking about introversion like people that were introverted were second class citizens. I don't believe that. I believe that introverts' path to success is just different to that of an extrovert. And when we embrace that, I actually feel that when it comes to all of these, and I like to use those inverted commas, so-called extroverted arenas, that introverts actually have the edge, because when we can lean into a system and a process and a strategy, we actually do get to lean into our natural gifts. And empathy is absolutely one of those, and active listening is one of those. So, what I find, what Ryan said in the podcast was actually really interesting. He said he used to get really scared speaking from stage, but what he realized is that he got scared because he was worried about what people thought of him. And then when he realized that he was there because people actually wanted his advice, and it wasn't about him at all, it was about the people in the audience and providing real value, he said, well, that I could do. Because for him, that was really about, empathizing with the people in the audience and what they needed and meeting them where they were. And I thought that was really powerful. Funnily enough, Ryan to this day still won't, he spoke from my stage, and he will not speak on any stage that doesn't have a back entrance, because he's not worried about speaking anymore, but he is worried about walking off the stage and getting trampled hilariously. Yeah. But I will say that for me, one of the comments I get all the time is, I felt like he was speaking to me. I felt like he was speaking to me. And I think that it's because of the same thing. Whenever I walk on stage, I used to think, oh my gosh, I'm scared of being on stage. I'm not comfortable being on stage. And don't get me wrong, my first stage presentation, the stage must have been 9 foot wide, and I must have bounced off that stage about 1,000 times, my hands flying. Surprisingly enough, it came well reviewed because the content was good, but I didn't become, I will say I had great content, and I was an okay to good speaker when I started, probably just an okay speaker when I started. And it was only during COVID that I had to do a whole bunch of virtual events, and I was doing like 2 to 3 sales kickoffs a day during January to March. And I had to really think about how I held myself, where I put my hands, how to engage the audience in a virtual kind of way. And because of that, it was a whole bunch of practice. And, I got the reps in. And funnily enough, Deborah, who's the operations manager for Liaison Speaking Bureau, they handle the meetings for corporations. She came up to me afterwards. She's like, you got to update your sizzle reel, because we booked you because of your content, but we almost didn't book you because of the stage presence. And now you've just nailed that. So what I think that most of the best speakers in the world do, you either have introverts that did what I did when I started, was rest on my laurels of, I've got great content, I don't need to be that great a speaker. And I think that's if I could reflect on things, if I could go back 10 years and change that, I absolutely would. I would have focused more on the stagecraft of speaking. And then you've got others that focus so much on the stagecraft, they're not so worried about the content. And I think that's worse, because the world's full of people that have read a book and now they're up on stage talking about it, as opposed to actually creating. And I believe everyone has unique experiences, unique past backgrounds that perfectly qualify them to help somebody. But once you get past that, what I really I think that's important is to diffuse what people see as introversion, because everyone knows introverts can't speak from stage. Well, okay, that's confusing, because if you think about, let's think about sales, and we think about the most well-known sales speaker on the planet, well, that would be Zig Ziglar. Well, he was an introvert. And, I interviewed Tom Ziglar on my podcast, and he talks about how his dad kind of had to, recharge after he got off stage, because that's the only difference. It doesn't matter. For me, I actually love speaking from stage now. And that's where people, have an issue. They're like, oh, I enjoy networking now, so I must not be introverted. I'm like, I didn't say you enjoyed it or you didn't enjoy it. Like, I love networking. And as a matter of fact, Ivan Meisner, the founder of BNI, the world's largest networking group in the world, is an introvert. Just Google, OMG, I'm an introvert, Ivan Meister. And it will come up because he didn't think he was, didn't realize until later life, until his wife's like, no, you're an introvert. And he had to go and do the test. So a lot of the times we feel like we enjoy something and therefore we mustn't be introverted. And that I actually think is a really bad thing, because for the average person listening that thinks that they can't succeed because they're introverted, a lot of the people that they look up to, they see as extroverted, even though perhaps they aren't. So that's why the Introvert's Edge podcast was so important. But like, let's think about some of the kind of people you would say are naturally extroverted. Like, you've got to imagine David Letterman and Oprah Winfrey are the best people in the world at small talk and therefore have to be extroverted. No, they're both introverted. If you think about, okay, crazy actors like Bill Murray, there's no way someone can be that dynamic and be an introvert. Well, he actually is. And so what we need to do is we need to think about what introversion actually is, because the fact is we can learn systems and strategies all the time to become amazing at what we do. We've just got to stop projecting extroversion on people that are successful so that we can actually take a step back and say, okay, I'm an introvert. These people are introverts, and therefore I can. And truthfully, in the world of sales, especially, well, actually in corporations in general, we've got to stop putting an artificial glass ceiling on our introverts and going, oh, poor Johnny's an introvert. Like, let's be honest, a lot of extroverts aren't the best listeners. They're not the most empathetic. And I'm not extrovert bashing. The truth is that if a HR organization saw that those were issues, they'd put them through coaching and training to help them fix the problem. But then they say, oh, poor Jason. Jason's an introvert. You know, he's never going to be a leader. He's never going to be in sales. So I'm not saying that everybody listening needs to be in sales, but a lot of people have decided they can't sell, and they may need that income to better their lives, or they don't want to start their own business. And because of that, they don't think they can because they can't sell, or they accept subpar performance of themselves because they're like, oh, I don't have that natural gift. So what I'm really about is helping people understand they can be amazing at sales. They can be amazing leaders, and then they can choose if they want to or not. But you can't know that you can't and then make a choice about what you're going to do with your life or what your activities you're going to focus on. And that's where I get really upset. And I remember I did this event, the American Association of Inside Sales Professionals, AAISP, crazily long acronym. And I thought it'd be fun. I did their main stage event, and then I did a leadership retreat for, like, we're talking the best in the business, like the most senior leaders in everything tech, everything finance, everything, everything. And I just thought it'd be fun to ask them if they were introverted or extroverted. And instead of putting like a tick box, I just left the field blank to see what came up. And it killed me to see responses like, oh, I was introverted, but don't worry, I'm not anymore. Like it was a disease they had to recover from. Or, oh, I used to be introverted, but now I'm more like an ambivert. And don't get me wrong, like there are ambiverts in this world that, sit in that middle of the spectrum. But most people that say that they got there are an extrovert that went and did huge amounts of coaching on active listening and empathy, or an introvert that went off and learned systems and processes to leverage their natural strengths. Like for me, when I get up on stage, the moment I get up on stage, I have a very scripted introduction that, because I've become better and more comfortable, has become a little bit more robust. But then I say, so how will I live up to this introduction? I know, let me tell you about Wendy, or let me tell you about Alex. And I go straight into a story, because I know the moment I share a story, it activates the reticular activating system of my brain and the receiver's brain, or the audience, and it actually creates artificial rapport because our brains synchronize. And because of that, I'm at ease, they're at ease, and now I feel comfortable. And then try and get me off stage. And because of that, most people would think I was an extrovert.
I think there's a lot of bias towards assuming that that's the extrovert introvert is what makes the quality of the speaker. But what I've picked up from a lot of the things you're saying is the quality of the preparation for the speak, the fact that you have your stories ready, then you put in the reps, like all of these is the work. And what I find is the worst, and this happens in sales as well, is using whatever XYZ feature that actually isn't a limiting factor to be your excuse for mediocrity. Thank you so much for listening to the Selling with Love podcast. We have some previous episodes you can tune into right here. And if you prefer the short form content where you get to the point in under 10 minutes, we do have a ton of clips from our best episodes that are being shared on this channel as well. So pick which one supports you the most. And of course, thank you for liking, subscribing, and of course, selling with love.